How do you best explain the existence of God as an apologetic, considering the Earth is 4 billion years old? Would Genesis 6:9 be any good? So the way that I understand it, Stephen, is that the Bible, to quote Galileo Galilei, the Bible tells us how to go to heaven. It doesn't tell us how the heavens go. St. Thomas Aquinas established that, reason and revelation go together. They're not opposites to one another. And Benedict, Pope Benedict, also spoke about this. This idea of reason and the Christian faith not being in opposition to one another, causing a bit of a scandal by pointing out that early Christians had accused Islam of not having a place for reason in their worldview, which was demonstrated by what happened to Ibn, I want to say Ibn Abd, but that's probably the wrong name. He was like the Islamic equivalent of Thomas Aquinas, and he ended up being banished and seen as a deviant. So for me, I don't feel the need to try and establish scientific facts in the Bible. I don't feel that need. I don't think it's necessary. I also think it's dangerous because one of the things about science is that new experiments can give us different understandings of what we're observing. And if you make the mistake that the church has already made once, which is you take the best science of the time, you dogmatize it, and then someone else comes along and discovers that the science is wrong, and then you've just tied your dogma to the best science of the time. And that's what happened at the Copernican revolution. Christians at the time of Copernicus were not stupid. There was really good science backing up the idea of the Earth being the center of the solar system. It made sense. There were scientific models that made sense of what we were observing. And then obviously Copernicus and Galileo Galilei, discovered evidence, the evidence contradicting the scientific structure became overwhelming, and that structure collapsed. But because the church had sort of dogmatized it to a degree, and it's learned the lesson, it hasn't really done it since, they then struggled to sort of reconcile themselves to the science. So why would we make that mistake again? Science has its particular subject of inquiry, which is investigating the material world. But it doesn't say anything about morality. It doesn't say anything about the supernatural. The scriptures teach us about God, what God is doing in the world, how God wants us to live. And science can't talk onto that, So we don't have to prove one by the other. For me, I'm happy that there is synergy, definitely, in the poetry of Genesis, vis-a-vis with things that we know about the world, like the fact that all the continents were together in one place at the beginning, like the fact that life began in the sea, then on the land, then that plants, the fact that there was light before there was a sun. Fact. Atheists often try to make a big deal of, Genesis is wrong because it says there's light before the sun. Well, I'm sorry, but as the dust cloud collapses and heats up to the point that it becomes a sun, it is definitely giving off light. The Bible isn't wrong; it's right. There is this overlap, this synergy, but the Bible shouldn't be read as a scientific textbook. So I guess what I'm really saying, Stephen, is that I think your question is looking at the issue from the wrong way. Science is looking about a very closed series of questions, and Christianity embraces that because of our understanding of natural reason, which is why science emerged in Christian Europe and not in the Islamic empires or in China, because the Chinese were following Confucianism, Muslims were following Islam. These philosophies and religions didn't have the understanding of the world that the Christians had, which is why science emerged in the way it did in Christian Europe. Which isn't to say that people weren't doing science before it emerged in Christian Europe. It obviously did. They obviously did, but the scientific method and scientific inquiry took off in Europe in a special way. And I think you're just thinking about this kind of question wrong, because Christianity allows for the closed world of scientific inquiry and then surrounds that with much more bigger, important questions. And Christian, just as an example of that, one of the challenges that Christians present to the world is that we think the highest form of knowledge is how to love best. And that's not really a question that is asked much in our culture. How do we love best? But that's a question that we as Christians should be asking ourselves. And it is, if a Christian culture dominates, that is a question that society would ask itself. And so as Christians, and that's a question that we can challenge the world with. So what about all your scientific inquiry? How do we love best? You know? Thank you for your question. I don't know whether you found my answer useful or not, but at least I've given you an answer. Let's have a look. Light was there in the form of photons, and God collected all the photons and created the sun. That's not how a sun is formed. A sun is formed by gas collapsing and then produces photons. But you're right, photons were there before the sun. Light was there before the sun. That's just a fact. Science pushes to prove its ideas wrong to move forward in understanding. It is mostly non-scientists that try to use science as truth, not a method. Okay, I think I get what you're saying, and if I understand you correctly, I agree. People that try to use science to prove non-scientific questions don't understand science. People that try to, and that includes a whole bunch of atheists, and agnostics who use science to answer non-scientific questions. Utterly ridiculous. There's ignorance on all sides when it comes to science. It's not just, oh, you religious people or you Christians are ignorant of science. There's loads of atheists and agnostics that are completely ignorant of science. It has nothing, zero, nada to say about questions of morality or truth or the supernatural, because it is beyond the scope of scientific inquiry. Science purely and only looks at material questions about the material universe. Full stop, end of story, nada más, no more. And people that don't get that are the ones abusing and misusing science.